Hey guys, gonna talk about SSNT. Quickly show you that's my afternoon chart. I'll actually show you my morning chart. Um, Missed the move. There's a decent bookmap read up here. They pulled the bids up here in the 13s, and I missed the move. I shorted a hidden seller, and then I did a market open long, manipulated long idea. So I'm longing out of the downhalt. Into some bids that were lower. And it's not just longing out of a downhaul, it's the whole structure. There's a lot of things to the structure that's very, very bullish, right? And it's things I've been talking about in recent videos. Sold most of it on this $10 fake breakout. This was a very small hold that I had. I ended up just selling this because I wanted to prepare for the short. I thought, now we're getting towards the top of this structure, and a lot of times these deep pullbacks have a hard time breaking a high a day. So I really wanted to sell, get prepared for the short, and my afternoon was, here's your big aggressive move off of support. Here's your retail chase. I short the top of the retail chase. Also, there was a bunch of ask. We'll see the ask on the book that I shorted into. That I thought made this a good trade. And then this is like your midday kind of flag. You see these lower highs, higher lows, big volume retail push that stalls into a big ask. The ask does not get taken out. Has no bids, and I shorted into it and caught the move. My average was about 1150 1156, and then I got the downhaul. I took a little bit off because we've seen this manipulation, all the empty space idea get abused. So I always take a little bit off. Also I was up like 20 something percent here, so might as well, on a strong market, might as well take some profit up 20%. And then I actually got stopped out, re-entered, took a little bit off, and got stopped out again. So we'll go over the move. You'll see that we're going to look at the pre-market here. Um, so I actually wasn't looking to trade this, just because the order book was so thin. This was such a thin order book. You could see there's like tons of empty space at the bottom, tons of empty space at the top. There's one ask up here that was like 3K. It's like a 3,000 share ask, but I'm like, man, um, this thing's really whippy. The reason you get these like 20% pullbacks with these 15% bounces, with these 10% pullbacks, with these 30% bounce, squeezes, like, because there's no orders on the book, so it's extremely risky to hit this really, really early if you don't have some type of, if the order book isn't thicker. I made a video on ATHE. Now, I shorted ATHE almost right away, right? But the order book was much more constructive, right? I waited for kind of the volatility to end. I waited for the ask to show up, and I read the bid support, and I was able to short 840s and ATHE and have like 880s to $9 to kind of risk, right? Where this, it's like, if you're trying to short this, unless you're like literally predicting the exact 3,000 share ask it's going to hold, I mean, it did hold initially here. You have to hope your average, and it's hard to get a good average on this because like this is touching 7.2, and then the bid is at 6.8. Look at this spread. This green line is the spread. The bid's at 6.8. I mean 6.3. The ask is at 7.1. This is a 80-cent spread right here, and that's because the book is so thin, and the volume also is kind of thin, right? So we have kind of thinner volume, thinner book. And then, the big reason you never want to short this, right? Because this looks weak, right? You got like, it's topping out, one, two, three, four times. It's rolling over. I mean, the book tells you it's a bad short, straight up. Not only is there a big bid here, right? But it's not even getting tested. So, like, the bet you're essentially making is, short up here into these guys and hope the bid gets taken out. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I remember seeing this, so I didn't have the read on this. So I was like, man, this is kind of not, there's an ask up here and a bid down here and a bunch of empty space. Like, it looks bearish, but I thought I was just focused on the ATHE at the time. I really do try to focus on the trades that where the volume's higher, the book is cleaner, right? And if there's many trades I miss, because I'm just unsure. I'm just unsure of the price action. But yeah, look at this. Bid stack, these follow up bid stacks. This is such like a huge long because look how if this ask gets broken, there's nothing between 7.5 and $10, which is insane to think about. But look how the stock went up. You know what I mean? There's always going to be some people selling in a high day, which is why it usually stalls around here. And then, oh my God, dude, this ended up being such a beautiful, beautiful long. But again, I was just focusing on ETHE at the time. I wasn't looking to go long or short this. I was just like, oh, let's just. Um, I'll come back to it when I think the book and the chart makes more sense. Of course, you get a big squeeze. The book is so empty, you get a big squeeze. Um, and then the short at the top ends up being when they start, this starts. I also a big reason I didn't short this is because there wasn't a clear ask up to 15. I was like, well, it'd be nice if like somebody at 13 here showed up with like 10,000 shares. That would have been nice. You know what I mean? Like, or like 5K, 5K, 5K shares stacked. If I had like multiple levels of ask getting put on the book with the bid getting pulled, would have been nice. Otherwise, you have to kind of read the $13 test. You see the bid get pulled, and you have to like read this and react in real time. Wasn't the worst. You could have done that, but I just didn't have the read. So what I did short was um, this down here, which looks like a huge chase, and I was not looking to short this at all. Like because we learn in strong markets when you get deep pullbacks, the book is very empty to the upside. So there's a lot of risk that they throw a big bid. The big bids move up, the big bids move up, and they squeeze, right? So I saw that. I saw this pullback. I'm like, all right, let's see what the bids look like. I'm like, oh, here's a big bid, and here's some more bids, and here's some more bids. I'm like, oh man, they might try to rotate this, but I'm noticing, I never want to jump in long or short without doing, seeing how it's setting up, seeing how certain levels are reacting, right? There's only a few longs that especially maybe near market open in certain situations that I might like want to go in right away. Um, you know, but overall, when something is in a deep pullback and starts to lose volume, um, it needs some structure to form, right? It needs to kind of soak on support for, I made a lot of mistakes longing into these dumps too early, and then the real long shows up 30 minutes later, right? So anyway, here's 19, here's 9. So first, 9 gets stuffed here. 20,000 shares going, okay? 9 gets stuffed here. This is 12,000 shares. 9 gets stuffed here. This is 10,000. This is 5,000. This is 15,000. And now I'm just seeing this 9 guy. And it's actually like probably even more than this. I probably saw like 70, 80,000 shares go through 9 on my level. So I'm still reading my level 2. I could see that the level 2 looks empty at 9. It says like a 500 or 1,000 shares or something, but there's like 40, 50, 60, 70,000 shares going through 9. I'm like, oh, there's a huge hidden seller. And then what got me kind of interested was they threw up a big bid right here, right? You could see how much darker it's getting here. And I was like, all right, this bid has to squeeze us through 9. Because look at all this empty space up to like 9.8s and 10.3s. Like, there's like all this room for it to move. Then even after this showed up, this was like another like 25,000 shares through 9. I'm like, all right, if they start to crack it towards this big bid, I'm going to assume this big bid's going to get taken out, which is why you could see that on my morning short, I actually shorted into this guy getting broken, right? Kind of joined the party that took out the bid, right? So, I knew there were some bids down here, so I just kind of took some off on not this crack, but this crack. And then I was like, all right, well, my average, if we go back and look at the chart, my average is all the way down here, right? And I know in a manipulated market, there's still so, like, this is down, down, this is down only, and down only can really trick people into thinking something is really weak when it's strong, right? It's the whole empty space thing. So if I'm shorting to a hidden seller here, I want to start, aggressively taking some profit, right? Take it on the dump. And then I saw the 1 minute 200, which is right where $6 was. I was like, that's actually a good final profit target. Just go for the 1 minute 200 level, and we can actually see on the book um, that they were throwing bids down here at this level, and I'm like, okay, that's good enough, and I just took the rest off here. It ended up being like the perfect bottom to take it off, but I just knew, like, you could see, like, look how empty the book is up here, man. Like, you get these quick dumps, and the book is so empty. Just all this, like, from 6 all the way back all the way back up here, all the way back to 9. That's why, that's really why this is able to go pull back, you know what I mean? Like, in low floats, they're just able to move it because there's not a lot of orders there. But you always learn, if you're going to be longing, you don't want to long, um, unless you're scalping moves. You don't want to long up here, because in low floats, the best longs always come after things that look weak, right? I like the long short traps. I like the long, especially I consider a lot of 9 a.m., 9:15 a.m. pushes like this to be bearish, right? I was like, that's usually bearish. If a market maker pops something at like 9:15, 9:20, a lot of times they're just abusing the pre-market to pop the stock a few, like 5-10%, and then market open happens and they slam it, right? It's a common pre-market little manip thing. So I said in my Discord, information down below, I was like, hey, I would love to see some type of, pullback back under VWAP, right? Get shorts to chase to under VWAP. And then market open happens and it downhalts. I was like, that's interesting. I was like, that's really interesting, because I'm still looking at this structure. I'm like, man, um, look at all this space up here, man. They can really, really, especially in this type of market, push. And SSNT is one of those stocks that's just, it's been heavily manipulated before. It's just one of those tickers that gets rigged when it has volume and the market's hot, and it's just a good low float rig candidate for doing stuff like this. So I already knew SSNT was a candidate for this type of price action. It's important to know your previous runners. Previous runners often do stuff like this. And if we go to the downhaul on the book, we could see here that it downhalts. And if you're going to be longing out of a downhaul, what you really want to see is you really want to see a lack of offers on the ask, right? So this is the unhalt. Unhalt's at 8.9, right? There's one guy at 7.5, and then there's like nothing up to 8. I'm like, oh man, there's just one dude here, and it's you're always gonna have like random offers at half dollar, whole dollar. It's just how human beings trade, man. They just put offers at half dollars, whole dollars. But then I saw on the pullback, I saw the 6.5, so that's a half dollar. But then I saw 6.6, so I see a couple layers of bids, and I see them not really getting tested, right? And then after the initial kind of uh, unhalt selling stops, I see the volume get really thin. I see these bids hold, and I see it start grinding back up. And I really wanted my average like actually closer to these guys. I would have loved my average to be like 6.7, 6.65. I would have loved to see this bid get tested and held another time, but I just made a discretionary decision to go long in the sevens. So I longed in the sevens. And then I just saw it grind, and because the book is so empty, it doesn't even take that much volume to start grinding this up into an up halt. It unhalts like 50 cents higher, so I'm already like another 8% in the money. I sold a little bit into this push because I saw there's kind of a lack of bids and ask up here, but I was overall, the reason I didn't full sell is because I'm thinking about the larger structure, right? Just because there's a big ask and no bids doesn't mean it's not going to go higher, especially if I'm super bullish this type of big dump manipulated price action, right? So, but I did sell a lot on this candle because they put up like 150,000 share ask at 10. They broke it and then slammed it back down, and I thought that had potential to be super bearish. So I full exited in I think the high nines or something like that. And then, but I should have re-entered right away. Look what they did. They again downhaul, gets squeezed, downhaul, opens higher, and they end up. I don't know why I did. Like this would have been. Trying to get my bookmap back open. Super big brain. We can see the unhalt here. So it opened higher, and there was like 50,000 shares here, plus like another 10,000 down here, right? Um, and the big brain would have been longing this dip and risking these bids, right? But especially since that's right where the 1 min 9 EMA was. But I was only holding on to a very small position. I should have just re-added the whole thing. And that's why, like this 50K guy ends up being here, 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 here. This guy walked it up all the way until high day. This 50K bidder was here. So either somebody was super bagged or they were just providing like a deeper support level for the push, right? But so like I said, that's the idea behind my Downhalt long. Unsurprisingly, these are the longs that give you the biggest percent moves and low floats. The biggest percent moves always comes after like very counterintuitive price action, like longing out of a Downhalt in the right context, like that type of thing. We'll focus on the short. So we get a big squeeze. I did not have the read on this candle. A few people in my room did. The idea behind shorting this candle would be every long is chasing this. This is up only, right? It looks like it's going to break high day. Everyone and their mom thinks it's going to break high day. Therefore, it's a good short, right? And there was a 13.5 and a 14 ask you could have risked, right? So actually shorting above 13 gives you a nice tight risk play on kind of like a manipulated idea that makes a lot of sense, right? But I didn't have that read. But I saw the weakness. But again, we get a deep pullback. Deep pullback. You never want to chase. I never short like these first weak bounces. I'm like, oh no, I missed the move. Let me short the first weak bounce that exists. Like, you'll get absolutely annihilated shorting the first weak bounce because you couldn't read at the top. You'll get annihilated doing that. So we get a deep down to support. But I'm like, okay, this thing is so manipulated. Like, the odds of a stock just going like that's this manip going like this, this, this. Like, this is how shorts think a stock is going to fade. They think it's just going to give weak bounces until 4 p.m. where it's down 80%. Like, that's how shorts think. That is never what happens. Just wait for the pullback. In this case, it's like a 30% pullback. And then I see this big aggressive push off VWAP. And again, every time you get a deep dump like this, there's no orders on the book. We can open up the book map. There's no orders from like 10.5 to 11.5, which is why it's able to bounce like this. You get 10% bounces like this because everyone's chasing, and there ends up being no sellers on the book to stop the stock from going back up. So we get a big strong push, we get a pullback, and I see the second. I always love the second push, right? Because in my mind, retail sees the VWAP bounce. VWAP's a common retail support level. They see the pullback, and then they long the follow-up. So on that follow-up, we'll see that, okay, here's the push, right? Pretty relatively empty book, especially when they start pulling the ask, right? And then the second push is here. You got this guy, you got 11.6, 7, 8, and 12s all stacked. And actually at the top of this push, you actually see them start to pull bids down here. I saw that too. So I was like, oh man, this is a great short. I didn't put everything on because I thought, man, my average is still like $2 away from high day, so there is some risk involved in this. I mean, I am ultimately risking these asks, especially probably the 12 guy. Uh, in terms of like what my risk idea behind this type of trade is. And by the way, I got in like what's great about this is since you can see where the asks are, if you see a bunch of guys at 11.7s, right? Try sizing in like you could size at 11.6, and that's how you get like top tick, wicks on these bounces, right? Because you could see where the resistance is going to be, so you could short below it if you want. I like to try to get as close as I can, so that way if I'm risking 4 stacks of ask, my average is right below it. And you see the bids get pulled, and I'm like, oh man, this is looking really good, and it just dumps 10% from my entry, and I'm like, great. But again, every time you get a big dump, there's a lot of empty space on the upside, and there's always a chance on manipulated stuff that a random bid shows up and a squeeze. You never know. This is, when I take losses, it's because, I'm making the read that makes sense to me, and a lot of times I get the reaction I want. But then, this happened to me on MINM in a pre-market, um, or VVOS, one of those two tickers where like I was making these same reads, but um, you never know what, even if you get the reaction you want, you never know what the follow-up reaction is going to be. And every time there's a 10% dump and you feel like a genius in a strong market, there's always a chance it gets pushed right back up. But that's why, from a risk management perspective, I understand that empty book makes it easy for these pushes to happen. But what really ultimately matters is what happens at these guys. Like, these guys are my risk, right? These guys are the ones I care about. Because on the book, I don't have to guess where resistance is. The book just tells me where the resistance is, and I can form a thesis based on what's going to happen. So I'm like, all right, let's get off the book. Um, I'm like, all right, it's doing midday consolidation. So midday volume gets really thin and moves take longer to happen. Sometimes this bounce will just go straight down, which is well. So you never know what's going to happen. So that's the trade. And even if it doesn't go straight down, at least I have a good average with some risk asset I can risk, right? So, but it starts to do midday consolidation, right? And we got a nice little retail flag, right? And of course, on like a lot of these long trap patterns, um, what ends up happening is you get some crazy, crazy high volume move, right? That's something that's like the relative volume's like, 10x, 5x, 10x, 15x of what was trading, 1 or 2 minutes before. It's always when those big, 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 like extreme relative volume differences happen is when you need to make. Those are when the most important reads happen because this just spent an hour, 2 hours consolidating, and it's building up all the longs, it's building up all the shorts, and in low floats, they're very controlled, they're very rigged. So when the rigger is initiating something with 10x the relative volume, that's really, it's going to be like, is this going to squeeze the high day? Is this going to swipe these lower highs? Is it going to downhalt? Like, it's like that's when the move happens. So that's when you have to pay the most attention. And we'll go to the book. We'll actually see on the book that on this push. So when that move happens, okay, when that volume comes in, the most important thing is, right, what does the ask look like to the upside? We could see these asks getting attacked, which means this rigger probably put these asks there. He's getting filled. But most importantly, if you're going to short it, is what does the bid are there bids following the stock up, right? Because sometimes what you'll see is you'll see $11 get taken out, right? The $11 ask gets taken out, and then you'll see a bid replace it, right? That's really strong, right? When you get these book flips, the ask becomes a bid, and then this ask becomes a bid, this ask becomes a bid, right? You'll see that a lot. That's really strong. But what's not strong is when things are just getting slapped, usually by retail, in the rigger who's initiating this, and there's zero, you can see there's no bids following this up. So this becomes really nice, and I knew there was a bunch of orders at 12. That was really kind of like my ultimate risk level. So I was like, I told my Discord, I was like, I'm looking at 12, looking at 12, looking at 12, waiting for the volume to come into 12. And you never know, is it going to break 12? Is it going to stall at 12? I just I just make a read and try to make the best decision possible. I saw probably 30,000 shares at $12 on my level 2. Barely got, I think only like 2,000 of it went through of the 30,000. And then I just saw the buying stall, and I just started shorting into this, right? I just added the rest of my shares. I was like, bid structure is perfect. One of the key ask levels I was looking at, because you can see it from the from the lower highs. There's all these lower highs under 12, under 12, under 12, so that becomes a good level, right, based on the structure. And I get the downhalt, but what's always kind of scary about these downhalts is this downhalt happens at like 12:40, and there's plenty of time left in the day for the stock to get rigged. In a weaker market, you'll get final moves at noon and they'll fade into the close. But in a stronger market, there's always a risk, especially when you get, these big dumps, a lot of empty space to the upside. I know that's potentially bullish, but I have a good average. This is a great candle to be short on. This type of candle can really lead to deep fades. Doesn't always do it. But from a probability perspective, it's good enough, and my average is good enough that it makes sense to hold it regardless of kind of what happens. That being said, I do take some off in the nines because I'm like, man, strong market. That's something super rigged. If I'm up 20%, I'm just gonna take some off. It's just never a bad idea to do so. And then I actually just moved my risk back up because there's like on the book there was like an ask at 10.5, 11, 11.2, 11.5, and I was like, all right, if it eats through every single one of these asks on the backside, I'll just get out around break even. But then what they did is they swiped 12 with, again, no bid follow up on this move. And then it started pulling back. I'm like, I'll go short that. Not as big size, but that's not bad. Maybe that's the move. Maybe it's come back up to swipe the 12 people and then pull it. So when this pulled down, I'm like, oh man, this is gonna oh man, these riggers, man, they brought it up just to swipe 12, and then they're gonna just it'll go straight down, and that's what I thought was gonna happen. Um, and then yeah, I saw these manipulated pushes started happening. I took just a little bit off, and then I got stopped out the rest, and that was pretty much the end of my trade on it. So yeah, nice little study these moments, especially on charts and the book on these rig plays, especially these midday stocks. Everyone kind of remembers VVOS doing a midday flag like this and squeezing. What VVOS did was super rare, super. The reason I lost on it because it doesn't happen that often, right? From a probability perspective, it made sense to make the trade because that type of move does not happen that often. And even this move actually ended up doing a after hours swipe into a pre-market gap down. So that's pretty. And now it is going sideways. So today, so yeah, crazy, 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 crazy play. Um, you know, the range was so big that I ended up making more than $2 on this dump, and then I made like 2.5. Actually, man, probably closer to $3 on the push, and then the rest of the trades. I made some money because I took partials, but ultimately they weren't. They ended up not being big, which is really funny because the trades that like I spent the least amount of time kind of analyzing. I was like, oh, hidden seller. I'll short into the bid. Like the two trades that ended up working just worked right away, and then the thing I actually spent the most brain power on just ends up making me the least amount of money. So it just how it is sometimes. So anyways, that's SSNT. Hope that was useful, and yeah. Have a good one, guys. Information down below about the Discord.